Welcome to the most off-topic presentation for the Conference for Animal Rights in Europe. Today I'm going to be talking about animals in Africa, and if you think about that topic, maybe what comes to your mind is something like this, wild animals. I actually gave a similar presentation at EAGX Berlin last year, and someone came to me after the presentation and said, okay, this was all very interesting, but I thought it's going to be about wild animals. And I think a lot of people don't realize that there's also a problem with these kinds of animals in Africa. And with this talk, I'm going to try to convey that message to you, that they also deserve our attention, that Africa is a neglected region, and what we can do about it. So my talk is going to be about mitigating the rise of factory farming in Africa. I will first outline the problem, why it's important, why we should pay a bit more attention to it than maybe it receives at the moment, and then also what we can do about it and what's actually being done in different countries on the continent at the moment. Thank you for the warm introduction. You've already heard about my role. I'll also talk a bit about our organization, but mostly also then how others can contribute and how we can partner up together. So I'll start with this very simple statement, which says African animal product consumption will accelerate. Anyone can say that, but there are very clear indicators for that. One of these is population growth. We can see in this nice map from our World in Data, we always put together these great visualizations. Most of the dark green countries are located in Africa. I think this does not come as a surprise to many of you. Actually, 77% of Africans are less than 35 years old, which just means there will be much more humans in the future who will want to consume animal products. Also, there is going to be economic development. Of course, African countries, a lot of them are still quite poor and are not yet at the level of industrialization as Europe or Northern America, for example. But we know that there's a clear correlation between GDP per capita and also meat supply, or also, for example, other animal product consumption. The correlation is quite clearly shown here. And if we just look at the African countries where they're located at the moment, they're all pretty early on that trajectory. So you can see a few exceptions here. For example, South Africa is always the exceptional African country because it's just a bit more Western or closer to the global north. But most of the sub-Saharan African countries are relatively poor and relatively early on that trajectory. But if we imagine them moving up this trajectory together with the population growth, we will see probably massive increases in animal product consumption in these countries in the coming decades. So that all to convince you that this is a very pressing problem that we need to work on. In 2021, the OECD and the FAO together estimated that African meat consumption will increase by 30% until 2030. That was the largest increase by any continent on the globe. This change in demand structures will also cause changes on the production side. That is, from our perspective, kind of inevitable, but of course we're trying to do something about it. So of course, if demand is increasing, these countries will also move more towards factory farming. Unfortunately, at the moment, African animal product production is basically very small scale yet, still in a few or most of the countries actually, but that will change. I mean, small scale farming will probably not satisfy the demand. The countries will also quite likely not be happy with importing all of these goods from other countries, because food security is also a major issue for them. You could say maybe alternative proteins can solve the issue for us. That's also, of course, tricky in the African context. We also have lower incomes and all of that, so price parity is even harder to achieve there probably. So it's hard to see a different scenario than increasing demand and increasing production of animal products in Africa. And this is also what the Food and Agricultural Organization expects. We have a blog post upcoming that a researcher or a volunteer of ours actually has written on projections by the Food and Agricultural Organizations, where they project farmed animal numbers, and this is only about land animals. Unfortunately, it does not include fish, but it projects animal populations in different world regions until 2050. We can see quite clearly, of course, Asia is the big one and will remain the biggest region for that on the globe. But Africa will quite clearly go into second place on that in the coming decades. As you can see now at the moment, I mean, we're somewhere here, so it's quite on par with other world regions, but this will change. And that, of course, is a massive problem that we have to work on. Also, in terms of the absolute increase until 2050, that is going to be biggest in Africa. And what's going to be most impacted by that is, of course, poultry numbers. I think that's not a huge surprise to anyone here. Those are the land animals that are always most impacted, and that's going to be the same in Africa. So, yeah, this is a highly pressing problem, and unfortunately, we think it's also highly neglected at the moment. In 2020, we estimate that only around $1 million were granted towards farmed animals in Africa. We know that the whole movement as a whole is very funding constrained, and we are also somewhat uncomfortable to say Africa is even more neglected and we need to direct more funds there because they're needed elsewhere. But we think that this is a very neglected space where actually there are even more low-hanging fruits maybe to pick in the coming years and with more active organizations and individuals on the ground. This estimate that I'm presenting here fits quite well with an estimate from Open Philanthropy. They made a similar estimate in 2018, 2019. There's also a more recent estimate from farmed animal funders. They come to around $2.5 million per million US dollars. 2.5 million US dollars, now I got it correctly. So don't take this number as being 100% correct, but the order of magnitude should be correct. And with that in mind, Open Philanthropy estimates that Africa receives less than 1% of global funding for farmed animals, and between 2 and 115 times less funding for every farmed land animal than other geographic region. The only other region that also receives or is so highly neglected is Southeast Asia. Yeah, as I've said, Asia, very important region, we don't want to downplay that, but Africa is highly neglected as well in this space. There's also a mismatch between funders' preferences, where they would like to dedicate their funding towards, and where the money is actually going. So there are two interesting recent reports that came out, or maybe even not so recent, 2021, from farmed animal funders, where they stated that there's a discrepancy between farmed animal funders' members' geographic interests and the location of their actual grantees. To make this maybe a bit more specific even, Rethink Priorities recently published a survey of members of the effective animal advocacy community, where members on average state that sub-Saharan Africa should receive 8 to 9% of all of the resources that go towards effective animal advocacy, and North Africa and the Middle East another 9.6%. Of course, North Africa and Middle East is hard to divide up, what is Africa, what isn't, but I think we can be, it's quite fair to say that at least 10% or something like that is what community members think should be going towards Africa. And of course, that's quite much more than the less than 1% that are actually going there at the moment. Also, in this report, there was a call for more experts in developing countries or populous yet neglected countries. So yeah, there is this discrepancy, but fortunately, we also see it changing a bit. So we see a change in this picture. This is a graph from an upcoming report that we're planning to publish at Animal Advocacy Africa, where we see the change in amounts granted to Africa by major farmed animal funders per year. You will recognize most of these names here: Animal Charity Evaluators, Effective Altruism Funds, the Humane League or Open Wing Alliance, basically, and then ProVeg. All of these organizations have massively increased their funding towards Africa since 2020, 2021, and this trend is also ongoing. We know that for 2023, for example, ACE has given out a massive increase in movement grants to Africa, which we saw as a very positive sign. So 2023 movement grants totaled $270,000 by ACE, which is another significant increase if you compare it to the roughly 130,000, maybe here that's a doubling. And also, for example, the Humane League or Open Wing Alliance now will give out probably around $400,000 US in 2023 to causes, farmed animal causes in Africa. So that is also continuing that trend. So all of that is to say we see positive signs. So this is a problem that we can tackle and where we can make progress. But there's still a long way to go. Even if we double the amount of resources, right, it's still a small fraction of the resources that are going towards Africa at the moment. So hopefully I've convinced you that this is an important and neglected topic. And then the other question we always, within the wider effective altruism space, I think ask ourselves is it also tractable? And here we think that there can be a lot of opportunities in early stages in Africa, because the factory farming industry is not yet as entrenched as in Europe, for example, or in Northern America or other countries of the global north. If these actors are not yet as strong, don't have the lobbying power that they might have in Europe, for example, then we might have a bigger chance of making progress. I will totally admit that maybe this tractability part is the weakest one of our three pillars, I would say, because there are good points of skepticism that you could have here. For example, a lot of funders say we don't know what are good organizations on the ground which we can support. They say there's a lack of enforcement in many African countries, lack of governance structures. They don't trust the systems in place. You can also say we don't really know what are the best strategies to help mitigate this rise of factory farming, right? We might have identified good strategies to lower basically the amount of animal product consumption in countries where it's already high. So basically fighting against cages, all of the work that a lot of the great people who are here at this conference are doing. But we don't really have a clear case yet for countries where actually this development was halted in its early stages. So it's more of a long shot, I totally will admit that, but taken together with just the enormous scope of the problem, we think it's still very worth working on. Summarizing, we have a colleague of mine has created this great visual, which you can also find on our website. I will not go through all of the details here, but I thought it's worth sharing. And if you want to find it and want to convince anyone about the cause, you can just download it from our website or screenshot it or whatever and share it with them. I think it's a nice summary of all the different arguments that I've tried to put together here. But now, I've given a kind of pessimistic talk about what the problem is, but I also want to say, of course, what we can do about it. And now I have to talk a little bit about our own organization and what we're doing, but also I want to talk about the organizations that we're supporting on the ground. So Animal Advocacy Africa, the organization that I'm working for, basically has as a mission to empower animal advocates on the ground. You can already see I'm Moritz, I'm from Germany. I'm not living in Africa, I'm not from Africa, so that might raise a few eyebrows. So what we are doing actually is we're supporting these organizations on the ground. We're not implementing these projects. So the local knowledge is there with the organizations we support, and we just help them become more professional, more focused in their work, and help them connect to the global movement, all of these topics. I would not have the local knowledge needed to run any campaign in Uganda or Zimbabwe myself. That's for the organizations themselves to do. I want to highlight three main pillars of our work that we're working on. The first one is basically our bread and butter, is the capacity building program that we started in 2021. For the first time with a pilot, and now in 2022 for the first full year was running, where we basically work together with organizations. We have group sessions, we have one-on-one sessions with them, we organize socials also, we provide them funding opportunities, give them ideas and feedback on their strategy, for example. So very different things. Someone I spoke to yesterday actually summarized it, so you're basically a consulting firm. I think you can say that with less pay, probably, and a bit of a different image. But that's kind of what we're doing. That's one pillar of our work and what we've been focusing on mostly so far, I think, and what was our first intervention. Now we also have two more recent projects that we've been running, a research project on identifying the most promising paths to avoid the rise of factory farming in Africa. As I've said, this is something that hasn't really been to my knowledge at least, or to our knowledge, been effectively done anywhere to really stop this development, and it's more usually coming in later when factory farming is usually already in place. So yeah, we are also putting in quite a bit of research to understand the best strategies there. And then the third pillar is a training program that we'll be running with individuals. So our capacity building program is mostly aimed at organizations, and now we also want to train individuals to pursue a stronger career in animal advocacy, to build their own organizations, to just build the movement on the ground, because we've had good successes with that in the past, and I'll talk a bit in more depth about each of these pillars now, so that you can understand more how they come together. First off, I want to highlight 4 exemplary organizations that we're working with. We have at the beginning, so we have by now worked with more than 20 organizations in Africa, but we also decided now to prioritize a bit more the ones that are most promising and that are most aligned with our strategic focus. A lot of the organizations are also pursuing a wide range of interventions, and if you've heard Sharon's talk at the beginning of the conference, we also think that focus is very important, and we of course try to partner with organizations that have that clear focus on helping farmed animals, and especially factory farming. So that's why I'm highlighting these 4 specifically. Some successes I would like to highlight that probably also contributed to the rise in funding towards Africa is because we interact with funders and also recommend certain organizations to them, or give them feedback, do due diligence checks, and help them understand actually what are certain organizations working on and which ones might be worth funding. For example, Daniel from Ghana we connected him to the EA Animal Welfare Fund. He learned about this opportunity through us, and now is also connected to the Open Wing Alliance and is doing cage-free work in Ghana, his organization, and was also a speaker actually at the AVA Summit, which was really nice to see. Sanele from Zimbabwe, the same, also connected to the Open Wing Alliance, doing cage-free work now. So we're really seeing also that growth and that close collaboration with the colleagues from OWA or the Humane League. Paul is a very interesting case because he was an individual that did not yet have an organization. So he was looking to start his own organization, but he didn't know yet exactly what to do, and we actually partnered also together with Animal Ask. I don't know if anyone of the colleagues is here, but basically where they also produced a report identifying, okay, what are the most promising ways that he could help farmed animals in Uganda, and then he now really applied his organization exactly to that cause. He now recently received a relatively bigger amount from the EA Animal Welfare Fund as well, received some news coverage, so there is some traction there. And this is also a reason why we are focusing now a bit more on individuals, because we've just seen that it's very helpful for us to come in at an early stage when organizations are maybe not yet set on their focus. As I've said, some organizations have a very wide focus, and it's harder for us to convince them that actually farmed animals is what you maybe should focus on a bit more. And we also, of course, are cautious of imposing our own opinions too much on the organizations on the ground. So helping individuals is a very promising area that we're trying to pursue, and I'll also give you a few more details about that in a second. But next up, our research project. I already talked about it a bit. We're working together with Christopher Bryan's team on that. If you know him, we're also very dedicated and doing a great job there. We have, as I said, we're trying to identify the most promising strategies to avoid the rise of factory farming in Africa. Of course, Africa is a massive continent with a lot of countries. So first, what we've already done is to set up a country prioritization, trying to look at the countries where is factory farming going to grow most, where is it still in its nascent stages where we can actually still make an impact. So for example, South Africa would probably not be a good fit for what we're trying to achieve. And now moving on from there, trying to narrow the scope and then go into more details on what actually could be done on the ground. We'll also then take the outputs from this research project and feed them into the training program, which I already mentioned. So the idea for us is that some of the advocates that we're going to be training might also then actively work on some of these strategies. So we are going to be running an 8-week course on the fundamentals of animal advocacy. I think similar to other programs that you are probably aware of, and we are also not ashamed that we have copied some of the materials from them, probably because there's good stuff already out there. And the idea is basically that we need to build a talent pipeline in Africa and find organizations, find people on the ground who are very motivated, very capable, and have a high potential of doing great work on the ground. You can see all of these details as well if you know anyone who would be a good fit. I realize this is not the best geographic context to probably ask people about it, but some people are very well connected, and there's always also some connections that might not be 100% obvious. So if you know anyone with a connection to Africa or located in Africa or with a background there, encourage them to apply. We are always looking for great people, and also one thing I would like to mention is then, of course, after the program, after the 8 weeks of the fundamentals, we will continue working together with the most promising advocates and then implementing maybe some of the strategies that I've highlighted in the previous slide, because that is basically the role model that Paul from Uganda has basically given us, that there is this opportunity to work together with individuals and help them kickstart their own project. And there's no guarantee it will work out as nicely as it did with him, but at least that's the idea that we have. There's other ways you can contribute as well to our cause. You can do basically what I've done today, just talk to people about the topic. Maybe that's also one step already that I find highly valuable. You know, just having this topic in mind. I know you're all doing great work in very important topics, geographic areas, different animal species, different kinds of projects. That's very important, but just raising a bit of awareness for this topic as well, I think that would go a long way already. We're always looking for collaborators on the ground. We are a very small team. We just started in 2021. So if you know anyone else who would like to partner up with us, who can use our help, who we can benefit from, always please connect us to them. We're happy to help. For example, if a funder is interested in African countries and wants to contribute to this, but they don't know who to donate to, right, or who to give grants out to, we're happy to recommend them certain organizations that might be doing work that is that fits with their scope. So, for example, if they're looking to fund vegan outreach programs in schools, we know a few organizations that have a good track record with doing these kind of programs. Or if they're more looking for cage-free work, we also have by now a pretty good picture about that, probably. But we're also always expanding that scope and trying to increase transparency on the whole movement, allowing people to connect together, and just everything involved with movement building that you probably can think about, we're trying to do as well. Then, of course, as I said, you can contribute to our training program. If you know anyone who wants to apply, always err on the side of applying. We can still filter it out, but yeah, we would love to hear from anyone who is interested about that. Yeah, with that, I can only say, please get in touch with us. You can find all of the relevant links here with this QR code or the small link at the bottom. I welcome any questions. Looking forward to the discussion. I hope you will have a few questions for me and for the rest of the audience. And yeah, thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you, Moritz. So please remember to continue asking questions, vote on questions asked by others, and also rate the lecture on Eventory. Now, back to you. With many African nations being rather poor, do you face opposition from people believing that money in Africa should be going towards helping humans rather than animals? How do you argue in favor of your cause in this context?
Yep, very good point. Absolutely, it's a very important topic that we come across frequently. One thing that I actually wanted to mention it in the tractability part, where I said, okay, what can we actually do in Africa? And this is one of the basically barriers that we might be facing, right, or that we sometimes can face, is that people say, okay, why should we focus on animals in Africa while humans are still suffering on such a large scale? Of course, for us personally, and I think most of you probably share that opinion, we shouldn't make that clear of a distinction, and it's important to help animals as much as humans. But that is something that we face. I think also you can make pretty good arguments that it's not an either-or decision, right? For example, if you think about food security issues, there are a lot of organizations in African countries who, for example, do these vegan outreach programs in schools, and they provide plant-based meals to the kids, for example. And in that case, they are running a program where they maybe also even talk to farmers about how they can implement plant-based farming in their subsistence farms or very small scale farms, and then also work together with schools, with their community to implement these plant-based feeding programs, which basically combines all of these different factors, which means food security, which is also climate resiliency is often an issue that they're talking about, and then also the animal part. So there's a lot of organizations, especially in the vegan outreach space, I would say, that combine these different components. But of course, when you go a bit more into the direction of policy work or legislation, then you will find these arguments a bit harder to dismantle, I think, because then, for example, official government bodies will say, yeah, but we need to develop economically, we need to industrialize our economies, and then it's a bit harder on that scale. But that's exactly why we are trying to find ways how we can also make progress on that angle, because that's the bigger lever that we can have probably if we make progress on the legislative side, on the policy side. But there, yeah, of course, it's a bit harder to convince people that not necessarily your development has to go at the expense of animal lives. But yeah.
Okay. So another question related to corporate outreach. Do you think that securing cage-free commitments and corporate outreach in Africa from international companies is an effective way to mitigate the rise of factory farms, for instance, compared to institutional legal work?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and maybe something I've hinted to in the talk already, and that's basically, we think that this outreach, these programs are great, and they're having a lot of impact directly on the animals that are already in cages. But kind of the idea that we're trying to, and also why we're running this research project, is to identify other strategies that we can employ in African countries that are more targeted at this systemic change or also preventing the rise of factory farming, right? So while our capacity building program that I've mentioned, for example, with that program we've connected organizations with the Open Wing Alliance or help them pursue projects like that. And we think that's highly valuable. But on the other side, that's why we're branching out a bit more into the research and then training individuals and starting new organizations area is exactly because of that, because this is a quite new or novel, different kind of problem that might need different strategies to tackle. And it's a very long shot. I think I've also heard from people who are very pessimistic about it and say it can't be done, but we at least think that the gains are high enough, the potential gains, that we should try it. And yeah, it's definitely the less safe option to play. So yeah, but we're trying.
Okay, would you say that it's both like hope and a threat, the fact that the infrastructure for factory farming is not yet developed to such extent in Africa?
Yeah, that's definitely part of the reasoning, and exactly why we want to go in those countries where factory farming, like the industrialization, is not yet as high. There are certain indicators from the Food and Agriculture Organization that you can look at where basically which countries don't have yet as high an industrialization factor as maybe others. And then we want to go into those countries that don't have that development yet, but will, according to the projections, will have that development. So that's the idea.
A slightly different question, being such a big continent with so many cultural and economical differences, how do you deal with the challenge of adjusting your programs to the local needs in different countries? Very
good question, and one thing that I always have to say is that we are probably underrepresented in Francophone Africa. So as our organization is international in nature and we deal a lot in English, it's just that if English is not the native language, it's harder for us to, for example, work together with organizations. It's something we totally acknowledge, and we also want to change in the future, potentially having French-speaking colleagues. But yeah, we're a very small team, and we have to take one step at a time. So that's what we're focusing on for now, is English-speaking Africa. And then also, in terms of the local peculiarities or the different local circumstances, I've already hinted at the fact that we don't always have the full local context in mind. I think we're very transparent about that, and we are not under any illusions there. What we're trying to do is also link up advocates together, of course, so that they can learn from each other. So we're really trying to focus on our meta function, really, of just bringing people together and exposing them to networks, ideas, helping them, giving them feedback, giving them opportunities, and those kind of things, where we're not actively saying, okay, in your country XYZ is the case, so please do that, because we are not in a position to do that. I think with Paul in Uganda, for example, we have given more specific strategic advice, but that was really tied to a detailed research project that was run together with Animal Ask. So in that case, there was a detailed research project going on, and we probably felt a bit more comfortable with making clearer suggestions, I would say. But for many of the other organizations, it's really mostly about helping them to connect each other with the global movement, learn about opportunities. We have, for example, also that might be of interest, I think it's somewhat Africa specific, but we have databases on our website with different funding opportunities, with training and mentorship opportunities, with all of the African organizations that we are aware of. So all of these different pillars we are providing just for free, basically, to all of the African organizations, and they can go there and use these resources themselves. So our aim is really to empower them to then go the next step themselves.
Next question. What are your thoughts on the tension between smallholder farming, which are presumably better for animals, and slower GDP growth? Would you fund intervention to slow the transition to mechanized agriculture?
It's a very good point and a very hard question, which I probably don't have the golden bullet answer to. I think, first off, it's very good to think about this framing, because, for example, there's a very good report on protein in Africa. I think it's written by Jeremy Bryce, so anyone interested in that topic can Google that, where he's looking for different visions of different stakeholders for protein supply in Africa. And there's basically different visions that different actors have. There's the big national, multinational corporations that just want to go in and basically replicate what's happening in Europe, for example, factory farming, industrialized farming, all of that stuff. Then there's actors like the UN, for example, or SDG development, sustainable development, that puts a lot more emphasis on this pastoralist development on the sustainable farming side. And then there's also a bit more the vegan activist community and also the vegan entrepreneurs, because there's also a bit of alt protein development, for example, going on. There are certain plant-based startups, not many, by far not as many as in Europe, for example, but there are some of these. So that these different visions, and we somehow, we don't position ourselves as an organization clearly saying clearly, okay, we only do the alternative protein development and only the vegan outreach, or it should be higher welfare standards, because again, we're trying to be flexible and support the organizations with what they're doing. I personally think that usually the gains for animals are, it's possible to have them without deprioritizing human welfare that much. I've talked about the food security aspects before, about the vegan school programs, these kind of things. There are certain programs that can help us to achieve the best of both worlds, I think. But yeah, that's my personal opinion. Exactly.
Okay. What did you learn in the last 2 years that you didn't know before? What mistakes did you make?
Yep. One very good learning for us, I think, was just that we, at the beginning, we had to find organizations that wanted to participate in our program. So it's not like we said, okay, hey, we're running this program, and then 100 organizations came to us and say, great, you're exactly what we need, please help us. And so it was kind of tough at the beginning, and we actually first wanted to run also a controlled experiment that we can also see the impact that we're having on the organization. So we were thinking, okay, maybe we can put 20 organizations into our program and 20 we don't put them in there, and then see what is actually the outcome for those organizations that we help, so that we can also monitor our impact. That was the plan. It didn't work out because we didn't have enough organizations. That's the problem with that. So I think it took a bit of time until we actually gained the momentum. I think we've gained a bit of momentum last year and over the last months, and now are also beginning to have more contact with the organizations on the ground. We are every week, I think I learn about a new organization that is doing something that is relevant to us. We add them to the database, all of that stuff. But at the beginning, we just had to basically work with anyone who was willing to work with us. And that also meant, I think, that we worked with a bunch of organizations that were not fully aligned with our focus, to be honest. Like, they maybe just put 10% of their efforts towards helping farmed animals, and a lot of the other stuff was towards working animals, companion animals, maybe conservation work, which is all, again, very commendable work. But again, the focus is different for us, of course. So we now narrowed down our focus a bit more to these 4 maybe high priority organizations. We have put a bit of more prioritization between the organizations that we want to put most of our energy in. So basically the new strategy is that we're casting a much wider net. So we're really trying to be aware of as many organizations as possible, and then we try to funnel them through and really understand what are the organizations that are most promising and which we can support, so that we can actually give those organizations the support that we can help the most and that will help animals the most. So that's something, maybe there was no better way to do it at the beginning, but it's definitely something that we've learned, which was suboptimal, and we probably put a lot of resources and time into helping some organizations that were then also not too keen on implementing our recommendations, or where communication was not great. But I think it's smoothing, getting a bit smoother, that relationship. Yeah.
Okay, so in some way you're saying that you're testing the organization this way, so you're funding more of them at the start and then verifying which ones of them are effective in your understanding? Is that the case?
So we have so we're not providing funds ourselves, right? So we're more just seeing which ones we can support with our guidance, with our resources that we provide others, and when we connect them to funders. Basically, we have a process, a funnel that organizations go through. We have a big database of organizations, and then set up a first shallow scoring that we basically do, where we look at what animal populations are they working on. If it's just a conservation effort organizations, we probably filter them out right away, or if they just work with street dogs. And then we go further in that process and try to understand, do we have any evidence from other people we know that heard about their work? Do we already have some kind of evidence that they're doing good work and are respected in their field? And then we have a certain threshold above in that scoring where we basically say, okay, this is an organization that is worth reaching out to in more detail. We then do that. And then we have detailed meetings with them, inquire about their work, try to learn more about them, and then we either add them to a program and with a certain priority, high, medium, low, basically, and then continue to work more closely with them. We also, for example, have a WhatsApp group where we share certain opportunities, or all of the different events and emails that we send. So that's basically how we go about it, really trying to set up this big database of African animal organizations that is first very unspecific, so that also involves organizations not working on farmed animals at all, but just building that transparency and then getting to the higher prioritization. And then, of course, the details of the work we only learn over the months and years, right? So we do this deeper evaluation, but of course you will always learn something new, and you have to be somewhat flexible and adjust to those newer developments. Maybe it can also happen that one advocate was very responsive at the beginning, and then somehow dropped communication with us almost completely, and that's something you have to accept, right? We try to still help them, but if it's not something that's going to work out, then you of course have to readjust as well.
Mm-hmm. So time for the final question, which I really like. It was originally phrased as, would you see it as a success if industrialization happened, but leapfrogging the worst forms like cages? So I would also like to hear you answer if you would consider it a success if Africa, in Africa, the industrialization in, say, 10 years occurred, but in a form that's the current goal for Europe, I guess. So yes, there would be industrialized animal production, but with good conditions, cage-free, and the stuff that we're striving for in Europe.
Yep. Again, I can't speak for the whole organization, and probably just for myself. Everyone has different hopes and aspirations and kind of ambitions, what they think is achievable. I personally probably think it would be a success. It's not necessarily what we're striving for, But given that it's such a massive problem where we're just a very small team, there's not many resources dedicated towards it, so if we can make any progress on this and really can avoid the worst forms of factory farming, I think it's already a success. Of course not ideal, but I think I would. Yeah, and also, of course, in certain countries, right? So it's probably not going to be that we can impact the whole of Africa, or, barring if we, for example, if we work together with the African Union and there would be some regulations that apply to all countries, that is of course the greatest success. But also if you can impact big important countries like Nigeria, Ethiopia, Kenya, that would already be a massive step, I think.
Okay, great. So wish you luck in your pursuits, and thank you for the lecture and the Q&A.
Thanks a lot, everyone.